May see the use, I suppose, of some special operations forces inside Iran. We've done that before. Desert One, back in under Jimmy Carter in 1979-80. They went in, they set up in the desert, and then they penetrated, but they didn't get anywhere. The whole thing fell apart. Is that going to make any difference? I don't know. I think it's a duck hunt. You know, you're out there trying to pick off ducks. I don't think the Iranians are going to roll over and play dead when you try to get to the island. Once you're on it, I think they'll pulverize the place. Then the question is, how do you get people out? Right. How do you withdraw soldiers or Marines that are badly wounded? How do you provide adequate water and whatever else they may need? More ammunition. To me, it's a nightmare.
In what could mark a dangerous turning point in the conflict, new reports suggest the Pentagon is actively preparing for weeks of potential ground operations inside Iran, an escalation that goes far beyond airstrikes or naval posturing. According to multiple U.S. officials speaking off the record, thousands of American troops, including Marines and Special Operations Forces, are already flowing into the Middle East, positioning for what appears to be a far more direct confrontation. In reaction to the news, Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, said Iran would rain fire on any U.S. troops attempting to enter Iranian territory. In his message, Ghalibaf also accused the U.S. of signaling negotiation in public while secretly plotting a ground attack. As the world prepares for this potential ground operation and its impact, retired U.S. Army Colonel Douglas MacGregor takes us down history lane to when the U.S. previously attempted such operations in Iran and how the exercise ended. MacGregor warns that this time it could be even more disastrous, particularly for U.S. troops, who will face significant danger and uncertainty. In his words, it will be a complete nightmare, and everything will fall apart instantly. In his latest interview with Annie News, MacGregor gives us a detailed breakdown of how quickly things can spiral out of control and what it all means for the United States standing on the global stage. MacGregor is not just another talking head, but a retired U.S. Army colonel with extensive experience. So this is a video you do not want to miss. Before we dive in, please take a little time to support our channel. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. Thanks, and enjoy the video.
What does finishing the job look like right now?
Well, that's the $100,000 question. Nobody really knows. The only thing that we can point to at this stage are really two things that he talks about. He continues to talk about preventing Iran from ever developing or fielding a nuclear weapon, though he tells us that he obliterated the nuclear development on his last strike in his
Midnight Hammer.
In June, yeah. And he wants the Strait of Hormuz to be open and says he's not prepared to cooperate or discuss anything with the Iranians until they open the strait. Now, beyond that, we're being treated to the usual litany of Netanyahu talking points, demonizing Iran as the world's greatest sponsor of terrorism and all this. Anybody who has any sort of background in the area knows that's nonsense. We can look for terrorists in a number of places, but we haven't found very many in Iran. So the bottom line is this is very disappointing. There were many of us that hoped that he would somehow or another say, look, we've done all we can do. We want the strait to be open for the world. It's in the interest of the global economy that this strait be open as quickly as possible. And so we are ending this conflict. And we're prepared to talk in the future with the Iranian government, whatever it is, but that didn't happen. You know, you try to get the point across to people that, just as an example, all these artificial intelligence companies that Wall Street values at trillions of dollars built their entire business model on cheap energy.
Yes.
Those assumptions are obsolete. It's going to get a lot worse from here. He's talking about commercial traffic is dropped to 95%. Now, we've seen some uptick in the recent few days. The Iranians were charging toll for whatever reason. They did not try to charge the Malays for any toll today, which is fine. It's obvious that if you are unfriendly to Iran, if you are hostile to Iran, if you are somewhere or another connected to us, you're the enemy, you're not going to get through. But otherwise, it's quite clear that the Iranians are trying to accommodate the rest of the world. I think we should do the same thing, but he's decided not to do that. He's fallen back on the old trope and the old mantra. So
mm,
I would say that the president has turned the global economy into an automobile that's racing down the side of a hill at about 100 miles per hour or 160 kilometers per hour, whatever you want. It's on a
mm,
collision course with a reinforced concrete wall. Seeing the dangers ahead, a prudent man would put the brakes on. He'd floor the brakes as much as possible. Instead, he's stepping on the gas pedal. Things are going to get a lot worse from here. So the people that are already worried, as people in India, Africa, Asia, everyone is worried about the same things. Plastic companies can't produce. We now have the various countries bidding for oil. Tankers that were headed to Europe suddenly turned around and went back to Japan and Korea. This is a catastrophe. You know, cheap energy is the lifeblood of civilization. It always has been. And that's what he should be thinking about. But instead of being the global leader that he wants to be, he's being very narrow-minded and unhelpful. So I think what we're looking at is a greater catastrophe down the line. We're looking at famine, because one expert told me, somebody who's in the agricultural sector said, you know, if he stops now, right now, we can probably arrest the most dangerous tendencies. We're going to suffer for several months, but we're going to get through this. But if he continues down the road that he wants to go on right now, another 2 or 3 weeks of this, it will take us years to recover. And we're reversing the Green Revolution. I mean, that's the biggest concern I have. You know, this is the great thing that we introduced to the world, and we're destroying it. And there's very little understanding of it. Now, here's something interesting. He said, we don't need oil. We have all the oil we need. California imports most of its oil.
right.
California faces a very severe crisis. It's not what he thinks. He doesn't understand the global market for oil. He doesn't understand petroleum. Doesn't understand there are 47 products out there that depend upon petroleum.
Mm,
And all these old firms and organizations all over the world are shutting down. It's a disaster.
What Douglas MacGregor is really pointing out here is something far more troubling than just military escalation. It's the complete absence of a clear endgame. On one hand, the administration claims it has already crippled Iran's nuclear capabilities, yet on the other, it continues to push for more aggressive action, tying its objectives to reopening the Strait of Hormuz while echoing long-standing narratives that many regional experts simply don't buy. But beneath all of that, MacGregor shifts the focus to what he believes is the real ticking time bomb, the global economy. He argues that this conflict is already choking off energy flows, disrupting supply chains, and threatening the very foundation of modern industry, which is built on cheap, stable energy. And if this continues for even a few more weeks, he warns, the damage won't just be temporary, it could take years to reverse. But then he takes it a step further. Because if the economic fallout is this severe already, what happens when this turns into boots on the ground?
Well, the buildup continues, and I do think you're going to see the use of ground troops. I think they will be used inside the Persian Gulf for the reasons that you've heard. They're going to try and seize these islands with the view of saying that they're now in control of the Strait of Hormuz. My concern is that you put Marines and soldiers on the island. First of all, how do you get them there? I don't know where they're going to come in from, but right now most of the U.S. Navy is far south of the Persian Gulf.
Yeah.
And now you have the Houthis. I imagine the Houthis are going to seal off the entrance to the Red Sea from the Indian Ocean. I would, so I'm assuming they will. How are you going to do with that? Are you going to start committing your bombers and aircraft to drop weapons on them? We think we used 11,000 munitions. Most of those munitions are the exotic types, the joint air to surface attack missiles that you launch from outside airspace that go in and hit targets. That's the tip of the iceberg. Tomahawk missiles, 800 of them. There are a lot of things that we've expended. I'm sure that we're scraping the barrel right now and bringing over to the region whatever we've got left.
Mhm.
So if they do what I think they'll do, they'll spend the first 4 or 5 days exhausting all of the exotic munitions in a hope that they can get at this mosaic strategic posture that and they can root out most of this. I just don't think it'll work well. I don't think they will. Now, at the same time, while that's going on, you may see the use, I suppose, of some special operations forces inside Iran. We've done that before. Desert One back in under Jimmy Carter in 1979, 80. They went in, they set up in the desert, and then they penetrated, but they didn't get anywhere. The whole thing fell apart. But you could see something like that, I guess. I don't know the details. I'm not privileged to that sort of thing. Uh, is that going to make any difference? I don't know. I think it's a duck hunt. You know, you're out there trying to pick off ducks. Then when you go back to the Marines and the Army, they could converge from different points if they can get over the mountains in Oman to the other side. They'd have to fly in. I don't think they're going to get into little rubber boats and try to row their way across the Gulf. So then you've got to fly them in. And he says, well, they have no anti-aircraft capability. I think they probably have a lot of shoulder-fired missiles left. And those are the things you worry about if you're in a helicopter or a B-22. That's going to be tough. I don't think the Iranians are going to roll over and play dead when you try to get to the island. Once you're on it, I think they'll pulverize the place. Then
Mm.
the question is, how do you get people out?
Right.
How do you withdraw soldiers or Marines that are badly wounded? How do you provide adequate water and whatever else they may need? More ammunition. To me, it's a nightmare. And these kinds of operations involving airborne forces are always difficult because you're putting them far out in front of usually an advancing force. And that advancing force has to be strong enough and heavy enough that it can punch through. We don't have an advancing force. What we've got is the fleet far south. I mean,
Mm.
if the Iranians are as bankrupt and weak as the president was trying to argue, why is the Navy parked hundreds of miles away? Why are we bringing in ground troops at all? It doesn't make any sense. So obviously, we're not winning. And again, I'm not in charge. I don't know who is. This Admiral Cooper is the commander of Central Command, but he's got numerous Army and Marine officers under his command, and they have to tell the president what they think is feasible. I mean, you develop an operation, you develop a plan, you make recommendations, and you say, I can do 2 or 3 things. These are the 2 or 3 things we think we can support. This is what we know. Based on this, it looks like we might be able to do X. Then it's a matter for the president and the secretary of defense to determine whether or not it's worth the risk. Because once you cross into the enemy's airspace and you're inside the country and you're moving in the direction of what you think is valuable to the country, to the enemy, to his networked strike systems and so forth, you could lose everything quickly. So that's a judgment call. It depends on whether or not he thinks it's necessary. Now, he didn't mention that in the speech, and I don't see any reason why he would. Why
Mm.
would you say that if you were going to do it? All that does is alert your opponent. And again, you've got the Chinese and the Russian satellite surveillance. And now you're moving in close to Iran. That's easy for them to monitor. Very easy to see everything. They can even tune in and listen to what's being said on the ground. That's what
Right.
people don't understand. That's how far the technology has come in space, which means conceivably a young officer, captain or major, lieutenant colonel that comes ashore somewhere is going to be talking and saying things on the radio. That's going to be encrypted, but it could still be picked up by satellites. I mean, there are all sorts of things that can happen, and it's a very, very dangerous operation. And again, I go back to the question, let's assume you control Abu Musa. Let's assume you control Karg Island. That's the real difficult one because it's so deep inside the Gulf. It's very close
Mm.
to Iran. The question is, what difference does it make? Oh, well, we're harming them. All right. You're harming Iran. For how long and what difference will it make? And is that the only way they can export oil? The last time I looked, they have pipelines. They have other means of exporting oil. And will the Chinese help them with that? I would think they would, since the Chinese are very dependent on the oil that comes from Iran, and they've been getting it at bargain basement prices. The point is, I'm somebody that views this entire exercise as ill-advised and ultimately unnecessary.
MacGregor's warning is impossible to ignore, because once you move from economic disruption to physical occupation, even in a limited sense, you're no longer dealing with theory or strategy. You're dealing with logistics, terrain, resistance, and survival. In his view, the idea that U.S. forces could simply move in, secure key points in the Persian Gulf, and control the situation is not just optimistic, it's dangerously detached from reality. He lays out a scenario that feels far more chaotic than what's being presented publicly. Troops potentially flown into hostile territory, exposed to anti-aircraft fire, cut off from immediate support, and operating without a clear path for reinforcement or extraction. Even the idea of seizing strategic islands, which on paper sounds like a tactical win, raises a much bigger question. What does it actually achieve? Because Iran's capabilities don't just disappear if a few points are taken. The infrastructure and the regional alliances remain intact. And then there's the part that should give anyone pause, the assumption that these operations would be quick, controlled, and limited. MacGregor challenges that directly. He points out that the U.S. has already burned through massive amounts of advanced munitions, that regional actors could widen the conflict at any moment, and that surveillance from global powers like China and Russia means there are no secrets left on the battlefield. In other words, this wouldn't just be a localized operation, it would be playing out under the watchful eye of the entire world. So when you step back and look at the full picture, the question isn't just whether this plan can work, it's whether it makes sense at all, because if the objective is unclear, the risks are escalating and the global consequences are already unfolding. Then what exactly is the endgame here? If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think this escalation is strategic, or are we watching something spiral out of control in real time? Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.